Legends of Tomorrow Season 2, Episode 14, Moonshot. This is a really good episode. It was probably one of my favorites this season. We got to see not only the team up of one of our heroes with one of our main villains, but we also got a really emotional episode, especially towards the end, which is very depressing. But I love this episode. They did some really good stuff. There's some stuff that they kind of introduced a little, like Rip not really being the captain anymore, and I'm curious how that's going to play out in the future. But they kind of touched on that just a little bit in this episode with Sarah now being the captain. But it was really good, and of course the way they ended, there's just a lot of stuff that revolved around family and loss and the future and changing time, and it was just really well done because it wasn't just like, oh, I want to be rich so I want to change time. Like, Nate was going through some serious stuff where he's like, man, we solved this problem and then we send my grandfather back in time so that he can be with my dad, and then maybe that'll change that relationship that I have with my dad. And then there's the whole element of, you can't do that because Nate probably wouldn't exist. And if that's the case, then the legends would all be trapped in whatever time they were in. Pretty much all of them were about to die when they were going to be rescued in the premiere as well. So pretty much all of them would be dead. And it was just very interesting. It's like there's so much that could change if they send Nate's grandfather back in time to actually raise his son Hank. And it was just very interesting going through that. And he's constantly dealing with it, like, I would always choose my family over time, and that's when things start to get revealed, which I figured was going to be the case. As soon as he found out, I was like, I know at some point he's going to end up telling the truth about what happens and kind of the legacy of Vixen and what happens in the future and things like that. And I didn't think they would do it in this way, but to have that relationship and have Amaya learn the truth about her family and then go into full detail at the end of the episode, I'm excited to see where that's headed. And they even bring up her granddaughter, which I thought was cool, but I'm just excited to see where they're headed with her character now, because she's going to learn the future. And it's one of those weird time travel things, and I think I mentioned this before, like maybe Nate telling her the future and her finding out about her future was how it was supposed to happen anyway, and she still ends up deciding to go back into the past, or Nate possibly ends up going with her. So there's just a lot of elements to that where it's like, maybe this was supposed to happen all along, but it's still exciting to see because we don't really know where it's headed. We don't know if this is going to be her changing, the past, or if it's just going to be how it was meant to happen all along. But I'm excited to see where they take that. Nate had a very emotional ending, of course, in the episode where they go through this whole thing as he's getting to hang out with his grandfather, and he's going, through the back and forth of being able to send him back in time to be with his dad and kind of change the relationship of kind of his entire lineage, where he gets to have a better relationship with his father and his father gets to have a better relationship with his. And I love that. I like the way that they played with that kind of story element. And of course, it starts off with Rip basically getting punched in the face because you have a guy who was mad at the decision that he made, where he left his family behind in order to protect all of reality. And I was thinking, honestly, if the heroes do end up putting this whole spear together, they could totally bring him back to life, and it's like, hey, you get to live and you get to go back in time, but I still get to be me, and we still get, they can literally rewrite reality and just be like, yeah, everything stays the same except you get to live, and so do you guys. They could totally do that if they end up putting the spear together. Because that's what I was thinking really in this episode when, I can't remember, I want to say his name was Henry, but the original Captain Steel, I was thinking when he first found out, like, okay, if I go back in time, it could possibly erase my grandson, which I think the odds are insanely likely. Like, there's just a lot of details. It's like comes down to the minute second as far as people being who they are when they're born. So any sort of variation in that, a single hour, a single minute, could easily change that up as to Nate having been born and Nate being born as a totally different human being. So when he found that out, the first thing I thought was, yeah, that's true, that would change. But if they make this spear, they could easily rewrite reality. That's the whole point of the villains going after it. So I just thought that was really interesting. Like, they could easily do that, and that's been the whole season. The villains want to rewrite reality. That's what Thawne's whole existence is, to keep his existence. Honestly, like, that's all he's trying to do, is remain as a part of reality. Like, that's all he wants. So there's just a lot to it. I'm like, they could easily get this spear put together, and as the heroes, they could do some good stuff with it. They could literally turn, Eobard Thawne into one of the heroes if they wanted to do that. That'd be crazy to see, and I don't think that'll happen, but that's something they could do. And it was just fun going through those ideas. Like, this is what the whole season is built around, is this item that can literally change reality. They could bring people back to life, or make it, simply where they never died. And then the characters themselves don't have to change because they're writing reality. It's like, yeah, he's fine, and everything else stayed the same. And it just works because they can rewrite reality. So we'll see if they even remotely decide to touch on that, because I feel like that's where the season is leading up to. Somebody's going to use this spear on something. I don't know what it's going to be, but that's been my guess since they explained what the device was. I was like, I feel like somebody's going to use it. I don't know if it's going to be a hero or a villain. Maybe we'll see a bunch of the heroes die and like one person lives and then they rewrite all the reality. We'll see how that plays out. But just sticking with this actual episode, instead of, jumping into the future, what they might do. Really love the emotional element. The comedy in this I really loved, especially Stein singing. That was my favorite. It was one of my favorite parts of the whole episode, because I knew he was going to do something, and I was like, I can't wait to see what he does, because I feel like he always ends up being the distraction. Like, he always finds some way to be the distraction when they need it. And I was like, I can't wait to see what he does. And then he started to sing, and I just loved that. And I was glad they showed it at the end of the episode too, just because it was a funny clip. But I really enjoyed that. Of course, Eobard Thawne and Ray together on the ship where they crash land and they have to team up. I thought that was really good. And they actually talk, and Eobard is like, hey, this is just interesting. I don't really get to work with scientists and stuff like that. And he talks, he helps them in the end because, of course, he gets to survive. Like, that was the whole thing. He gets to live if the legends live. So he helps them, and he tells them like the 83 degrees thing, because he knows what angle they need to go in, because he learned like astrophysics or whatever he said in like elementary school, which I'm just like, that's nuts. But it was really cool watching them work together and have these conversations back and forth about who they are and what they truly want. And he talks about Ray and was like, you could have used what you had to power like an entire city, the Dwarf Star, if you wanted to, but instead you made a suit so that you could become a superhero because you wanted to change your menial life, basically. And I was like, that's very interesting. It was just cool watching them go back and forth about what they truly wanted from their own lives. And I really enjoyed that. We actually get to see Ray, anybody really, who's not a speedster, stand up to Eobard because he doesn't have super speed in space, which was my biggest issue with the whole episode. I know I'm not a scientist, but that was dumb. That didn't make any sense, that Eobard Thawne couldn't move at super speed in space. That makes no sense whatsoever, because Ray's like, there's no gravity. You can't move at super speeds without gravity. And I'm like, gravity has nothing to do with super speeds. Like, if you don't, if there's, which there is gravity in space, it's way less, because otherwise, if there's no gravity, Ray wouldn't be able to jump on the moon. He would have jumped and he would have fallen off. So there's very low gravity, but there's still gravity. So technically, he would be able to move at super speeds. But even if there was literally no gravity, and I get that there's, a lack of friction and stuff like that, his body would still be able to move at super speeds. Because if I can move like this when there's no gravity or low gravity, he can still move at super speeds when there's no gravity or very low gravity, because the Speed Force is like magic. It's not like the Speed Force is this thing and he has to have it on him in order to use it. He can tap into the Speed Force from anywhere in the planet, anywhere in the galaxy, the universe. He can go to another dimension and the Speed Force still exists for all speedsters. Like, it does not matter if he's in space. He can move at super speed because he's using the Speed Force. It's like magic. He doesn't have to meet certain criteria in order to move at super speed. So that didn't make sense to me. Whereas, like, he can't move at super speed because there's a lack of gravity. That's not true. That doesn't make any sense, because if you can move, period, then you can move faster. Like, it's within his body. It's not like he absorbs. I mean, it kind of is, because that's the Speed Force, but like I said, the Speed Force is literally everywhere. Like, if he was on the moon's surface, he could run at super speed. He wouldn't be moving. He might not move as fast, because just the gravity and stuff would make a bit of a difference, but he'd still have super speed. So that really bugged me when they were like, he can't move at super speed because there's no gravity. Like, he'd still be able to do the hand thing. Like, that has nothing to do with him landing on the ground and running at super speed, because that's what I thought was going to happen when they first started fighting. When he was pushing him and they're fighting, I'm like, if he pushes him against the wall, he's screwed, because his feet are going to touch the wall, and then he'll have something to push off of, and he'll start running around at super speed, which he would have because he had his power. So that really bugged me, because I'm like, that's not how, like maybe if it was like a random character that just could move at super speed and stuff like that. Like, it doesn't affect Superman, but I guess that's because he can fly, so he has that automatic momentum. But it was just like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, if he has a surface to touch onto, his feet can move at super speed and he can run at super speed. If he is in a still position, his hand can still vibrate at a super speed. Like, it might take longer to get up to it because of the lack of gravity. Like, he would be fighting against something, as far as his hand automatically going down because of gravity, he'd still be able to move at super speed. So it just really bugged me, because I was like, that doesn't make any sense. So that was like my huge gripe about the episode, and I really had to talk about that, because I was like, that's not how speedsters' powers work. Maybe if it was a random person who had super speed and they weren't an actual speedster, that was like one of their other abilities that they got, maybe that would have an effect on them. But as a speedster, he's not affected by that sort of thing. His body would still be moving at super speed. Like, it just would, because if he wanted to, it definitely would. Because when he's screwing the thing, he's like, it's menial tasks and stuff, and I'm like, well, it doesn't matter. He can still do that way faster. Like, if you want your body to move faster, it will. Even with a lack of gravity, you can still make it move faster than normal, and eventually it would build up to the normal amount of speed that he'd have, because he's moving it back and forth really fast, and he'd be able to turn the thing. So I was really bugged the whole episode. Like, that's not how speedsters' powers work. But that's just me. It just bugged me a lot. But I still love the episode. It's still really good. And, they're on the moon, and they get the spear. They're able to, fortunately, survive. And sadly, that comes down to someone opening the hatch so that the ship can actually get to the right angle. And Nate, unfortunately, has to watch his grandfather die. So that was a really sad moment. And, I just don't know where they're headed with his character. Excuse me, I like what they did with this, because he's had, really for one season, they've done a lot to build up his character. I've actually really enjoyed how they've really utilized the fact that he's connected to the JSA, and just how that works. And Rip having scattered everyone across time, we find out that his grandfather didn't actually die. He was sent to a totally different time period and stuff like that. So it was cool the way that they worked around that, and he got to meet his grandfather under, two different circumstances. So it was just really cool, and I certainly enjoyed the way they built up his character simply over one season, and now what they're doing with Amaya, and I guess the future of all the Vixen characters. Who knows where that's headed, because there's only one totem. So she at some point does have to give that up to, pass it down so that her granddaughter can eventually get it. And it's just like, man, that's just really crazy to think of. But maybe, who knows? I mean, it could be, well, they've already done the series. They have a Vixen animated series, so they'd have to basically change all of that for it to make sense. Now, if she just like went to, the present and was like, here you go, I'm giving this to you now because I'm done. But she'd still eventually have to have, a daughter who would eventually have her granddaughter. So I don't know where they're headed with these characters, but really good episode. Definitely emotional, especially, with a very good ending. But excited to see where they're headed. We got at least a reference to the Death Time Wraith, which was formerly Zoom. So that was really cool. And of course, Eobard Thawne has to like take off again because he can't stick around. So I thought that was cool. I thought we'd get to see him because they had him in Flash in this week's episode, and that was exciting. And sorry if that's a spoiler for that. But they had him in Flash, so I thought that was really cool. And then they referenced him in this, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. But they did some other stuff in Flash, and just in case I won't spoil that. But I was very surprised with the way they did, at least the reference to the Death Time Wraith. So that was cool. I wish we got to see it again, because that was just a great freaking episode when they focused on the villains. But excited for where we're headed next. Apparently we're getting Snart for real this time. It's not just inside Mick's head. Who the F knows what that means? Maybe he blew up and was just scattered to a random time, and they finally showed up in the perfect time, and it's like, hey, I've been here this whole time. who knows if that's how it's going to play out. But I'm very excited to see how they're going to do this, if he's actually coming back to the show. If not, why not? He probably won't because of Prison Break, Wentworth Miller, as well as Dominic Purcell, who plays Mick. Both of them are supposed to be in the Prison Break series, so I'm kind of worried that Mick might actually leave the show in the next episode because they are both supposed to be going to... I know they filmed some stuff. I don't know the filming schedule of the two different shows, but I'm like, that kind of worries me a little because it just makes sense that he'd leave the show as well so that they can go back to Prison Break. So I'm like, I hope that doesn't happen in the next episode and we end up losing him as well. And it's like, crap. So, we'll see what happens there. But really enjoyed this episode. Of course, we'd love to know what you guys thought about it. So please comment below. Let me know your favorite parts, your least favorite parts. And I definitely want to know where you guys think they're headed as far as Amaya learning about her future and her daughter and her granddaughter and her village. What are they going to do with that? Is this how it was supposed to play out the whole time? Do you think that she will be... Well, I mean, she couldn't make an... I guess you can't make one if you're erasing someone from existence. It's not really, an aberrant sort of thing because you're erasing someone. So I guess she can't really make one unless she erased, one person and then, kind of like Nate was going to do to himself. He would have erased himself, but someone else probably would have been born. So I guess in a sense she could make a time aberrant, but I would love to know where you guys think that's headed and just how that's going to affect the story for, maybe not the next episode, but I'm sure it'll be a focus in there somewhere, like a side story. But we'd love to know where you guys think they're headed with that. And of course, I want to know what you guys thought about this episode in general, so please put your comments down in the comment section below. And of course, thanks for watching.